Hey everybody, welcome back. Today we're going to look at how we can create arrays in geometry nodes. We're going to import a model and look at the various configurations we can use to instantiate our array. So let's go ahead and bring up a geometry nodes editor to the right of our 3D viewport. Next we'll add a new geometry nodes modifier to our default cube. And let's go ahead and remove our default input. Next we're going to append a file with our objects in it. I'll make these objects available on GitHub if you want to download them. We can see that we have a large spiral object here, which we aren't going to be using today, but feel free to experiment with this one as well. We can hide this object and see our other object, which is a small simple penguin character. Let's go ahead and make this one invisible as well. Next, let's add a grid, which will be the base for our array of penguins. And we can go ahead and hook that up to the output. Let's go ahead and add an instance on points node, and we'll put it right between our grid and output. We'll bring in our penguin to serve as our instances. And because this is a fairly simple model, let's go ahead and add a set shade smooth node. We can go ahead and hook up our instance nodes. Now we can see a group of penguins, but they are intersecting and creating more of a penguin cluster than individual penguins. So let's increase the size of our grid to give them some breathing space. And if we want more penguins in the array, we can increase the number of verts on our axes. Now we have an army of penguins. Now let's look at some different configurations. We can get rid of our grid mesh, and let's bring in a mesh circle and hook that up instead. And we have a ring of penguins that are practically indistinguishable from each other. So let's bring up the radius of our circle, and we can also bring down the number of verts in the circle to affect the number of penguins. Let's look at how we can get some movement in our instances. We can use the rotation on the instance on points node to start. And this will rotate all of our penguins simultaneously. Now let's bring in a rotate instances node. And we can see that we get identical rotation here by just using the rotation element. But let's bring in a position node. And we can hook this up to the pivot point of our rotate instances node. Now watch what happens as we rotate our instances on the z-axis. Pretty neat stuff. Next we're going to bring in a mesh line to give us a row of penguins. We can delete our circle and bring the line in here. We can see that the penguins are stacked vertically, as this is the default orientation for a mesh line. And we can adjust the height so that there is room between our penguins. But if we bring it down to 0, we can expand our array on the x-axis to form a row of penguins. We can also make these diagonal by adjusting the y-axis. And we can adjust the x-axis to increase or decrease the distance between the penguins. We can also adjust the count of vertices in the line to adjust the number of penguins in our array. Let's take a quick look at how these look rotating from their positions. We can also remove the position pivot point and rotate them in place, which again is the same rotation we get from the Instance on Points node. Next, let's bring in a random value node to use for our pivot points. We'll change this to a vector and plug in our pivot point. And if we want a wider variance, we can increase the max value on our random vectors. And we can see that even though they are using varying pivot points, they will all come back into a line at 360 degrees. Let's reset and look at another configuration. We can go ahead and remove our random value node. Let's delete the mesh line node and bring in a cube. And we can see that with the defaults, we again have too much crowding of our penguins. So let's scale the cube up. We'll zoom out and then let's add some more vertices. Now we have a cube of penguins. Let's go ahead and bring in a transform geometry node so we can do some simple animation here. Let's bring our current frame to 0 and we'll keyframe the rotation for both the transform geometry and the Instance on Points. Next, we'll move to the last frame. We're going to keyframe the transform geometry at -360, and we'll keyframe the Instance on Points at +360. Now we can play our animation and see how it looks. Let's go back to frame 0. We'll hook our position node back up to our pivot point. And let's keyframe our rotation here at 0. Now let's move to the last frame and keyframe our rotation at 360 as well. Let's go ahead and look at how our penguin animation looks now. Let's bring up our shader editor so we can set a simple background. We'll switch from object to world, and then let's add a sky texture. We'll switch to rendered mode on our viewport, and that's a little intense, so let's bring down the strength a bit. We'll set up our camera using Ctrl-Alt-Numpad 0. We can select camera to view and make our adjustments. Let's uncheck this setting so we don't inadvertently alter the camera position. Now we can render our animation. And here it is. That's going to wrap up our discussion today. I hope you found this video informative and useful. Please like and subscribe for more riveting Blender content. I thank you for watching. I hope you have an amazing day, and I wish you all a very happy Blendering.